Are we live?
I think we're live.
We're live.
Okay, welcome back to Book Chats with Mostly Books. First to note, we are again not being recorded by anyone else, so we respond to comments when we're done.
Yeah.
Second, we have a mic, and we're hoping that this will solve the sound issues. So we'll see. The mic is a learning in progress. So
Yeah, we got it
today.
So testing 1, 2, 3.
Pretty much. Test, yep. All right. Moving on. So tonight we are talking about The Doll Factory by Elizabeth Macneal. Do you want to do a rundown on the synopsis?
Yeah, even though my synopsis kind of lose steam after like 2 sentences, but I'll try my best. So we're in Victorian England, Victorian London specifically, and we meet a few characters. So Iris and her sister work in a doll store. Iris paints their faces, their hands, and her sister Rose makes their clothes. We meet a taxidermist. Can we call him that?
I feel that's a very good description of what he is.
So Silas is our taxidermist, and he has his little curiosity shop. It's very strange. We'll talk about Silas.
Mm-hmm.
And then we meet like a street urchin named Albie, who kind of is our go-between all these characters. And we meet some pre-Raphaelite painters, including Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the more like historical ones. Like,
Yeah, Hunt, Rossetti,
Malay.
Malays, yep.
Yep.
I think it was just those 4 that we really... Oh, and Sadal, the gal.
Oh, yeah.
We also briefly meet her. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we meet these characters, and we have chapters from different points of view, and it is about obsession. So one of them... Can I tell them which one?
Yeah, well, I think there's lots of them, but yes.
Yes. So Iris becomes like the object of a painting of Silas's obsession, and we kind of like see how twisted everything gets, and that's where our story goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so kind of a mystery. It's one of those that's a very slow mystery, though. Like, something big is going to happen, but it takes almost to the very end for the real big mystery part to come into play. It felt very character-driven, I guess, is the best way to say it. I mean, lots of things still happen, but the mystery is more in the background than it is in the front and center.
We've read a couple books like that now. So, like, Animals at Lockwood Manor, and If We Were Villains. Does this, feel the same? Like, because it felt more like, it reminded me of Villains. Like, there's a mystery unfolding, but it's more about the characters and, how they're unraveling. Rather than how this plot is unraveling around them.
Right. I think that is a very good description and comparison.
Yeah. Look at us. We can remember what we read.
Right. First of all, I really want to say that I like this time period.
I was going to say, did you like it?
I have mixed feelings about the actual book itself. I enjoyed parts of it, but I think what I enjoyed the most was the Victorian setting.
Yeah, that was well done.
If I had to pick a favorite art period, it would be the Pre-Raphaelites. It's very iconic English poster.
Yeah.
It's the one you always saw in your English teacher's room.
It's true.
So in that sense, I love both of those things. And I also liked the references to the romantic authors. They aren't really directly talked about. They're sort of talked in the, the sections.
Yes. So the novel's in parts as well as and then there's smaller chapters within the parts. And before each part, there's 1 or 2 epitaphs or epigraphs from various sources. So Christina Rossetti's Goblin Market is one of them.
Yep.
I think there's one from Keats.
Yeah, and there's
Of course there's Keats. He's romantic.
And Tennyson as well.
Yeah.
But then one of the painters also does the Mariana Tennyson.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think I need to reread that. It's been a long time since I read that poem, but I love Tennyson. And so all of this made my English nerdy heart very, very happy. The book itself was a little weird and not in the weird way I thought it was going to be weird.
Yeah.
And in some ways I was sort of like, okay, let's get on with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that part, but again, I really liked the setting of it all and what it made me think about.
Mm-hmm. I felt that too, because our book opinions usually agree 90% of the time.
Yeah.
But it does have like a very good sense of place, and I really like that it was focusing a lot on like the weirdness of the Victorians and like how kind of creepy they could be.
Yeah.
Because you see a lot of it is like it's these pretty styles and like turning into like Edwardian stuff, like dresses or like language of flowers is very romantic, and but the Victorians were weird.
It was such a weird time dealing with the let's get rid of our constraints and get out of this, but then at the same time still really adhering to those traditions.
Yeah,
like they were just so confused on what they wanted.
Like, we can't talk to each other, so let's talk to each other in flowers.
Yeah.
But then romanticism's also going on, so there's this big influence on feelings.
Right, and escaping back to that simpler time.
Yeah. So, and there's the whole, like, rejection of the Enlightenment, and, like, not everything is rational, which clearly not everything is rational in this book. That's a whole thing. But, so I'd really like the time period is set in, how it gave you a sense of the Victorians.
Yep.
The age and, like, how we travel around the city. I liked that, too, even though the characters are like, oh, we just went for a walk around the park, but it felt like things they do.
Yeah.
Or, like,
I agree.
their attic, Iris's attic apartment, Garrett, her attic Garrett, whatever they're called.
Yeah.
So I just liked all of that, too.
I did, too. I thought a sense of place is a perfect way of putting it. Yeah. So if you're looking for something like that, this is totally a great book. I do feel like we should say that maybe this isn't a book for everyone.
Yeah.
It was very detailed on some, like, horrific, graphic things being done, specifically the animals.
Yeah, and also, like...
with the taxidermy.
There's a lot of attention to, like, bodies, like, human bodies.
Yes.
Sometimes in, like, a violent sense, sometimes just in a sexual sense.
And sometimes just in a grotesque smell sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was very descriptive and had some very graphic imagery. So, if you are a faint at heart person, this is probably not the book for you.
Yeah.
Which I completely understand. Now, all that being said, I feel like that also was very true to Victorian times. It was smelly. It was grotesque. So it was it was right to be written like that, I guess. I just was unexpected about a few of it.
Yeah, it's gritty.
Yeah.
That was a word you used.
Yes,
earlier.
I did use the word gritty. And yes. Okay.
Where did your mixed feelings come in?
I felt a little ambivalent towards the characters.
Same. Guilty.
Like, I really liked Albie. I wanted to like Iris, and mostly I did. I was confused with her and her sister's relationship. But there's some parts about, like, her and her, I guess, sexual awakening that I was kind of like, okay, we don't probably have to spend this much time on it.
Yeah.
I thought that part was specifically weird, and I think that was the most surprising part. I mean, it was fine. It was just, I felt like we spent a lot of time on that. And like
a lot of time on that when there's, like, other things going on. It's like,
yeah.
One you might be more interested in, but also, like, maybe this should be more focused on in the plot.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason Elizabeth did this, and this is just me hypothesizing, is that I think she wanted to create that sense of confusion for women, and that they were, you know, they're supposed to be considered an object that's beautiful and whatever, and not touched, but at the same time they're trying to woo a guy to, you know, to get married, and there's all that confusion on and shame that goes along with all of that. So I think that she was trying to portray that confusion and shame to the reader, which then just made it feel awkward. So I guess that was my takeaway.
Because we do get a lot of that in the beginning. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Jane Austen, when they're like, oh, you'll be ruined if you do this.
Yeah.
So, like, very Pride and Prejudice, like, oh, your family's ruined, you ran off with Wickham, and like all that.
And that I felt like carried totally through the book when she becomes a model, and her family totally outcasts her at that stage, and then she's basically a kept woman. So there's a lot of those themes that continue through the book. But
Yeah, she's a kept woman, and then like the paintings the Pre-Raphaelites are doing all have this like what they say, like confinement and like prison themes.
Yes. The captured woman is definitely a heavy theme throughout, and the damsel in distress waiting to be rescued. Now, I will say she flips it towards the end, and the damsel in distress saves herself.
Yeah.
Which I really, really was happy about, because that was sort of annoying me. Everybody all the guys were wanting to save these women.
Yeah.
And that was frustrating.
And because, like, you keep, like, reading at the end, and she's, like, thinking, like, is he going to come? Or Silas is like, he was just here, is he going to come back? So it seemed like there were a lot of, like, players, but none of them had a good chance of helping her. So it seemed like she really was just on her own.
Yeah, she really had to save herself, or there was no hope. Yeah, I agree with that. And I was happy again that was how it ended.
That was very satisfying.
Before we go too far, more spoilers, what did you think of Silas? Because you seem like you wanted to chat about him.
Yeah, he's very creepy, which how do I want to start this? So I also had like a thing, like I wasn't necessarily emotionally invested in characters. Like I did like Iris well enough. I liked Albie. I liked Lewis at points. Silas, I found he was like interesting to read because it's a very twisted perspective that we're getting, and you really see how he thinks so highly of himself, but you're just like, no, dude, you're a creep. Like, stop. So you don't root for him, I guess is the way to put it. But he is interesting.
You know, and I think that the rooting is a really good point, because I feel when you meet him initially, like, I wanted to root for him.
Because you don't know who he is yet.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we do spoilers from here?
Yeah, I think we're going to do spoilers from here.
Spoilers from here on out. So, you know, I actually really felt, like, sympathy towards Silas in the beginning, because, like, she's showing you how he really thinks he's upper class. He's just waiting to get discovered. He's going to have his own museum on this taxidermy. And then, like, he's showing how he's reading. And suddenly I'm like, oh, this poor guy. Because he's reading at, like, a beginning stage reading level. Sounding everything out. And so you kind of, like, start to feel for him.
And how he spells fragile with a J.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you start to learn more about him. And suddenly you're not really feeling so much like that.
Yeah, especially in like the very beginning, he's talking about like, oh, I'm going to get into the exhibition. I've written this guy so many times, and then he works so hard on his
taxidermy project.
Yeah, so you're like, okay, I can go along with it, and then you just read more of him. And you're like, oh no.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. So he talks about Flick, his. You know, it appears
like
to
childhood
be childhood friend, which is almost a sweetheart when you first
it seems like it.
Hear about her. But when did you realize something was not right?
Well, so Flick, they grow up together,
and they grow up in the same town.
Yeah,
I don't even know that they really grow up together.
It sounds like they spent a lot of time together, though.
It sounds like that.
And he's like. He brings Flick up a lot, like, oh, when I knew Flick or when Flick was around, and I figured it out when he's waiting for he's waiting for Iris to meet him, and he says he's like talking, imagining what he's gonna say to her, and he gets like thinking about Flick. It's like, oh, I saw her hair like dead in the water or something about a river, and I'm like, oh, she's dead, you killed her, she's like dead, not missing, not. So I figured it out like pretty early on, before halfway through.
Oh yeah, I feel like I figured it out more like the second or third time she was brought up, because suddenly it was like, we were going to run away together. I really wish I knew what happened to her, and I thought, oh dear. And I only thought that because he was so detailed about his animals.
Yeah.
And some of the things he's done to them to get them to the taxidermy stage. You know, he killed several of the animals. So I was like, this feels like a big red flag. And yeah, it was.
Yeah, I thought it was going to go more that she had, like, rejected him. It was going to lead that way, and then we were going to find out after that. So I thought we were going to get a different timeline for the relationship. But then it was going to be like, oh, no, you killed her. jumped the gun and got there first.
Now, I will say it was interesting because he's clearly lying to himself. And so it was really interesting as he was having those flashes of, like, his real memory would come in. And he'd be like, oh, I just need to push that away. I just need to forget about that.
Which is interesting because then he's lying to himself and he's lying to us.
Yeah.
So then it's like there's different layers of what's true in the narrative. And true is then relative.
Now, would you say he's a sociopath? Or do you think he was just a bad guy?
Wasn't animal abuse like one of the signs?
And the awkward and like not understanding human emotions. Like I don't feel
he doesn't feel like he regrets any of this, or like what he regrets isn't what he should be regretting.
Yeah,
he doesn't feel remorse.
No, he does in the sense that the girls didn't fall in love with him. That's what he feels bad about.
Yeah, but he doesn't feel bad
but
for
doesn't
murder.
Feel bad about killing them. Yeah, I initially also thought maybe this is a nurture thing. Like he was just clearly his mom abused him, and he was clearly not loved
and abused too.
Yeah, but no, I think this was full on sociopath.
Because like he talks about like when he's going around selling the skulls to people, so it sounds like. Well, those don't sound like great relationships if you're a child selling skulls to your neighbors. But that seems like they were better relationships than he had with his mother. So those could have been, I don't want to say normal, but...
But then we're getting it from his perspective.
Yeah.
So now I kind of feel like everything has been really twisted and that the way he thinks he interacts is not how he interacts.
Yeah. Because remember the whole, like, Gideon thing where he's like, oh, we're such good friends. And then Gideon, like, hated him, and he didn't click until like Gideon like tricked him.
Yeah, full on tricked him. Which even that I kind of was like, oh, you were just a naive kid. But at the same time, as we keep going on and interacting, like when he's at the bar and stuff, and the way he thinks he's acting, and then when you talk to like the madam later, it was totally different. So I don't think he got how he was it. Well, would you, if you're a sociopath, get how you are? Probably not. Yeah. Okay. So Silas was creepy.
Yeah. Also, his name's just kind of creepy. I'm probably sure I've seen like a crime drama where the murderer is named Silas, so that's
sadly,
also probably
I thought that too. Which maybe is not a good thing. So somebody write a story where Silas is good so we can have a new memory.
Yeah, so we can like break this cycle of name association.
Right. That would be great. What did you... Well... First, do you want to talk about the paintings, or do you want to talk about, like, Iris's journey, like, her character development journey, or...
Let's talk about Iris, because then that might, like, lead into the paintings.
So, I appreciated that Iris decided to, like, not pick herself up by her bootstraps, but she just decided what she wanted in her life, and she really went for it. And even though society is telling her not to do all these things... I really appreciated that she just went with her heart. She was very progressive thinking.
Yeah.
Now, I will say I'm a little bewildered by her sister relationship. I don't know if... Well, there was the letter. I guess that's why Rose was so upset. She thought that Iris had told the guy that she was going to marry that she had smallpox, which wasn't the case. I don't know who sent that letter. If anyone even sent that letter. Yeah. I don't know if there was a letter. To me, that was unclear.
Yeah, because wasn't Rose always like... Because Iris thought, she's like, oh, yeah, I don't know how he found out.
Yeah.
And then Rose just blamed it on her.
I mean, that was a long grudge to have.
Against your twin.
Against your twin, who you work side by side with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just... That was a little heartbreaking. I was really happy when they reconciled. Mm-hmm. And I hope that it worked out in the end for them.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about that because it's like there's all this like conflict between them, and then Iris leaves and goes and like makes her own choice. Like, this is what I'm gonna do with my life.
Yeah.
And then there's a while of them not talking.
A long while. But I mean, she's outcast by her family because she chooses to go and do her own thing. I mean, she wanted to paint. This was her whole plan, and modeling was the way to do that.
Yeah.
So that was sad, yeah.
But there's also that implication that modeling is like, she says, like one step above prostitution.
Yeah, one step up, basically. Even though she was really welcomed into the PRB group, which was really funny.
Please ring the bell.
Well, that's what Silas thought it was. The Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood initially, which turned to Brethren later, because they did allow women in eventually.
I did like that she notices that, where she's like, she wants to be a part of this group, but then she's like, oh, but even their name tells me I don't belong. I know there was a lot of weird moments where she was definitely one of the, not like one of the guys, but one of the group. But like one of the guys.
Yeah. And then they'd be like, okay, let's go to the tavern and have a beer. And she'd be like, well, I can't go. Yeah, I can't associate with you guys like that. Like, it's great for you to go do that, but I will be considered totally ruined. So that was
even more than I already am.
Right. It was a hard place for her.
Yeah.
And for women in general at that time, but yeah. So anyway, I really liked her growth. I loved that she became an artist. Mm-hmm. I love that Lewis, really took him.
He took her seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their romance was fine.
It was kind of expected.
It was expected. It was sweet. I think my favorite in the whole thing was Guinevere, which is Lewis's pet
wombat.
Yeah,
I was like, who's Guinevere?
That was amazing.
Because Lancelot, there was another wombat. There was Lancelot.
Had two yeah. Mm-hmm.
How do you have two wombats in Victorian London? I have questions.
I know, right? Where did you get them?
I have questions about this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, on one hand, like, completely not surprised that he has a wombat. On the other hand, like, why?
And I love that he named them Guinevere and Lancelot, which is totally a Pre-Raphaelite moment.
They didn't get along.
But they didn't get along, which is a good point to that as well. Because, it was very romanticized, that courtly love.
Oh, yes.
And this maybe will lead into the painting. The other theme I really noticed that was pretty heavy in this was both Silas and his art and then the PRBs were trying to freeze time.
Yeah.
Do you think any of them actually achieved what they were, that freezing of time?
Well, isn't it the answer, like, obviously no?
Well,
because they can capture a moment, but they can't, but time is still going to carry on with them. So, like, so no? Not really?
Yeah, I think I set you up on that, sorry.
I was like, wait, this is going to get way deeper into, like,
question.
the philosophy of art. But as you can see, this book makes us talk about a lot of different topics, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, again, I think I liked it so much because it made me think of other things. Like, it was very rich with the time period.
Yeah, and, like, I went and, like, looked up, like, Pre-Raphaelite paintings. Because I was reading it. I was like, oh, I'm going to go look up some of these. And, yeah, it's fun when texts, like, interact sometimes with history or art or other literature. So there's, like, intertext with other things.
I do like when things lead me to other things. Yeah, and I do want to now go back and read Tennyson again. Because I haven't read any Tennyson in a long time. But I really enjoyed his stuff.
Yeah.
And his escapism. We could all use a little escapism right now, right?
Yeah, we really could.
Let's all just do that.
Speaking of escapes, should we talk about the end?
Yeah. What'd you think of the end?
The end, like the painting end, or the end before, when she gets out? Which end do we want to talk about?
Well, okay. What'd you think when she got out?
When she got out, I was really glad because she just like whacks him with a bucket,
and she had been beating him with a chair arm.
Yeah, but the bucket was more satisfying.
It was, especially because he was so like, I need to be neat and tidy.
Yeah, and the bucket is like
her
full
waist.
Yeah.
I also liked that as well. I really did like how that part was written. I really felt like you were trapped. You really felt those trap moments.
And you feel the stakes, like, increasing the longer she's left down there without any contact. And you're just like, okay, how are you going to get out of this? You really need to get out of this.
And the longer you realize there's no one coming because no one knows. Yeah. Okay, what did you think about the painting part?
I liked it. And I have questions. So I liked it in that it felt like an interesting way to end the book, especially since like we start out with her like painting her face. So I think the painting is Iris's painting.
Oh, I do too.
I think we're supposed to assume that.
I think that's a fair assumption, and I think, well, especially because they even in it's kind of an epilogue. It's written as if a critic was going in a year past to the exhibition, the Royal Academy exhibition, and is writing it up in the paper.
Yeah.
And he does say she several times.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that's a fair assumption. Plus, it really was what she wanted to paint when she finally was inspired with her. She wanted Lewis and Elby in it and herself. Yeah. Now, all that being said, I wanted a different... Like, I kind of wanted a little bit more.
Something more explicit about all the threads and character threads that we've had up to this point. Because it's like, we kind of assume a lot. Because, like, we get... Like, she gets out of the basement, cellar, and she, like, sees the sun, and is, like, very overwhelmed by that. And,
and she's so weak, and, like...
Yeah, and then it ends there, and then cuts to the painting.
And a part of me was like, oh my gosh, you're coming out of this dark, scary alley into Victorian London. Is anyone even going to notice if you, like, just pass out? Like, is anyone going to come help you? Like, I mean, that sounds terrible, but I'm not sure. I feel like this is sort of an everyday occurrence there. Like, people just... falling asleep or
Silas like mentions like drunks like asleep leaned against walls all the time,
and it's not exactly a well lit or well traveled alleyway. So I too was like, did she get to the street? What happened? But yeah, I guess we're supposed to assume it ended well. She was reconciled with Lewis and her sister.
Well, it's like sun. That means life and like
hope
new and like reality. If we're gonna go to Plato, but anyway,
right? Oh yeah, that actually was a very good
It's the cave. I don't know if that's actually like relevant here, but anyway,
it felt because she came out of the cellar. I mean, no, that felt really on point.
Yeah, but is there the whole thing with like reality and that this is what's real in your life?
Well, because in the cellar she was totally hallucinating.
So she was hallucinating.
I mean, what's to say they weren't the shadows she was watching?
That's true. The cave is always irrelevant, it seems.
Right. But yeah, I kind of wanted a little bit more on that ending.
Me too. Like Lewis, like what happens to her and Lewis?
Yeah, did they get married?
Did they become the lovers in the painting? Like, or was that?
Oh well, that was for sure.
Or was that like a moment from their history that they already had, or was?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Is it like drawn from their history, or is it like
reflecting that makes me
even
more sad that could actually be her reflecting back.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not going to say that's what it is. I'm going to say that they reconciled and she got married, so she's no longer a ruined woman. Although part of me was like, it's okay. Like, you're an artist.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean you're ruined.
Because there's like all the objects in the painting like reflect parts of her life or like the other objects you see earlier in the story. So that's why it's like easy. It's her. But are we looking back or are we looking forward?
I want to say forward. But I guess that was the whole... But I mean, she had to paint it, so she had to live. And so that's the whole ambiguity of the ending. But no, she really did have to live because she hadn't even started that. She sketched it out, I think is all. So
certainly hadn't gotten it to the level of completion for it to be in an exhibition.
Right. That was exciting.
So maybe that answers your question, like, do they capture moments of time? And that we can't tell if this is a past or a future. Yeah.
Well, I just thought it was interesting that all, I'm going to say gentlemen in this mostly, wanted to freeze time. Yeah, right. And I just didn't understand what their desire with freezing time was. Like, I guess Silas, because he was freezing time, but he was doing it with what he thought.
But it's also like a measure of control, isn't it? That, like, Silas doesn't really have control in the way he wants, which is terrifying to think about. And then artists are kind of on the fringe a little bit, so there isn't a lot of control or social stability there unless they, like, really make it big.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not disputing any of that.
No, that's fair. I didn't think you were, but it's like, yeah, I don't know.
I just thought it was an interesting thing that they both said that. And especially because, to me, the PRBs weren't really doing that at all. Like, they were really doing... What they were capturing was more of the courtly love that they envisioned in their head. It was so unrealistic. Even
though they were like, we're being realistic, we're using color and this sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's still, like, hyper real in a way that doesn't feel real.
No, I will say I did like that she ended up playing out the painting that Lewis was doing of Gugemar and shoot, why can't I think of the queen? And the queen.
Yeah.
I don't know that she had a name.
Did she have a name? Did she?
That's terrible that she didn't have a name.
Are we surprised, though?
No. But I hadn't really thought about it till then. So she played it out in a much more realistic way, which I did appreciate that thing that she was trying to do. Like, see how ugly and terrible this really is? It's not all pining away on these beautiful chase lounges and whatever that the Pre-Raphaelites tend to depict.
Or Ophelia dead in the water.
Oh, yeah.
That's
with
a
the
whole
flowers.
thing. It's like a whole thing that even in death you have to be pretty.
Yeah.
Or like
they did mention it. I did like that they mentioned that painting specifically.
Or like Albie's sister when she's like, "Oh, a dying girl is like the most sought after," because she's trying to pass off the flu as consumption. Yeah. I'm just like, that's a whole thing. The Victorians were a whole thing.
They really were. I know. I thought that part was like the grotesque-y. I didn't necessarily need in my book, but was very realistic, I'm sure. All right. Any other thoughts on this book? It was. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead and you answer first.
I wouldn't say I didn't. I wouldn't say I didn't not like it, because there are parts that I really did like, especially with like the setting and how it's done. I like how it's told in parts, and that we get. Also, I love chapter heading or chapter names rather than just getting chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3. I love when they have names.
That's funny.
So I like that. I did like Iris. I was creeped out by Silas, but I think we're supposed to be creeped out by Silas. So I did like it, but it's, again, not a book that's going to change my life.
Right.
Which not every book has to.
No, I think that's fair.
That's a lot of pressure to put on books.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure to put on every book you read.
Yeah.
What do you think of the title? Totally switching.
The Doll Factory?
Because
for a while I was like, I kind of get it, but also I don't really get it.
I know, right? Okay, so initially, before we'd read the book, I thought this was going to be her working in the doll factory the entire time.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting that we went way outside of that and became these artists, which was cool.
We don't stay there for very long.
But it's so short-lived.
Yeah.
That then I was like, is the point of it that Iris was the doll?
That's what I think, and then all these other settings, a doll factory.
Mm-hmm.
Because even this is like Silas's trade.
Yeah, well, and he so wanted a doll, more or less, or a pet, which she keeps saying, which was interesting too. He didn't.
Again, ownership, control.
Yeah, I really feel like it was just about exactly the girl being the doll. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, yeah, I enjoyed it. I think I maybe liked it a little bit more than you did.
You did, yeah.
But I think again that was because I really liked all these other influences, and it really made me think about them. And a book that makes me do that, I tend to be like, oh, okay, that was actually pretty good then, because it's still staying with me.
Yeah.
So it was a good read if you like that kind of.
Yeah, I think there are like
Victorian.
people, or like will really like this. I just maybe we weren't those people, or this wasn't the right time to be reading it.
Well, that could have been too. All right, what are we reading next week?
We're reading a little tiny book. We're reading The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Nevo, and by tiny I mean tiny. It's very thin.
Is it a novella?
It is a novella.
Okay.
And there's a sequel, which is also a novella.
Is that one out?
It's either out or out soon-ish. Okay. It has a tiger.
We'll find that out by next week.
But we're going back to fantasy, and we're going back to an Asian-inspired fantasy, and I'm very excited. I've had this on my list for a while, so I'm excited to read it.
Yeah, I remember when I read the synopsis, I was like, yeah, this is totally something I would read.
A young royal from the far north is sent south for a political marriage in an empire reminiscent of imperial China. That's the first sentence.
You know, truly any royal read, I'm like, yep, I'll read that.
Yeah, you really like court drama.
I really do like court drama. I don't even mind which court it is. I'll read them all. So, yeah, I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, it's going to be very different from what we read. We're getting back to a royal court from gritty London streets.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what theme carries over as we tend to keep doing.
Yeah.
Even not realizing
So what carried over from Silence of Bones?
Well, it was sort of that... Yep. Bones. Women's servitude. Mm-hmm. I mean, we were still early 1800s. I mean, yeah, London, but still early 1800s.
Yeah.
Just a lot of those difficult women being boxed away, I felt like themes. I felt played over in both.
Yep.
So we'll see. We'll see about Empress.
We'll see what carries
Hopefully not taxidermy. That part I'm kind of done with.
Yeah, I'm kind of over taxidermy.
That was a bit much.
Like in Lockwood Manor, it was less.
Yeah, that one
It was a different kind of creepy.
Yeah, but we didn't have all the details of how the animals became stuffed, and I was fine with that.
Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
We got more of we got them falling apart, but that was.
I was still fine with that.
Yeah, this was very.
Yeah.
It's not body horror, but it was very explicit.
Yeah, it was sort of animal body horror.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone. All right. Well, thank you for again joining us, and we'll see you hopefully all next Friday night. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.